Well, I would like to welcome everybody to the fifth in our series, the World Kamishibai Forum. I'm especially excited about this webinar looking at the historical Kamishibai and two really interesting examples of historical Kamishibai. Also, it just so happens that February 19th, yesterday was the 79th anniversary of the Day of Remembrance, which is a really important day in Japanese American history. It was the day when the Executive Order 9066 was first issued. So that just happened to be serendipitous because, of course, Walter's going to be talking about their project looking at the Japanese American internment. I hope everybody who is attending has had an opportunity to see both videos. They present very different ways of telling history and also very different experiences between the Japanese American experience and the Japanese Brazilian immigrant experience. Before we begin with your questions, and I hope as you develop questions, you put them into the Q&A so that we can ask those later on. I'm going to start by just introducing our guests today. Whoops. Hold on just a moment. Oh, I guess I already have it open. So I'll go back. Okay, I wanted to begin by introducing Walter Ritter, who you have heard from over and over again as one of the founders of this, and one of our colleagues that Donna Tamaki and I are working with to create the World Kamishibai Forum. Walter Ritter is in San Diego, California, and he's an actor and also the artistic director of Write Out Loud. I actually heard about Write Out Loud as I was working on my dissertation that became this book, Performing Kamishibai, because I was looking at how it was becoming globalized. I was really interested in where else it was happening. And I came across Write Out Loud and Storybox Theater. And so I wrote about Walter in my book way back in 2012, and it was published in 2015. And all these years later, we finally met sort of over Facebook. And that's how we decided that it would be really great to have an in-person international festival in San Diego. And we worked very hard to make that happen. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we have come up with this alternate virtual venue. But I do want to encourage everybody to go to the Write Out Loud website. The educational programming is just one part of the really exciting work that they do there. We were just talking about, they have a Listen to This that you can subscribe to and get really beautifully read stories in your email every day from Monday to Saturday. So there are lots of really great programming to look at on his website. The other presenter, also I have never met in person, but we're very excited to have Flavia Wolfowitz here from Araçatuba, Brazil. She's an art educator and storyteller, and she's been very active on all the social media with her many Kamishibai performances and online festivals. So I'm very excited to learn more about her work, which she'll share with us shortly. We are very lucky also to have Yumi Izuyama. One of the exciting things about this program and working on this program is to meet all these new people who work on Kamishibai. And Yumi is also from Brazil, Brazilian Japanese, and she now lives in Cambridge, and she develops educational materials and Kamishibai, her own original Kamishibai stories, which you can actually purchase on her website. So I really encourage you to check out her Japanese paper theater website as well. Today, Yumi is here, has graciously offered to interpret for us because none of us speak Portuguese, and without her, we wouldn't be able to hear all that Flavia has to say about her programming in Brazil. So I want to turn it over to Flavia now to explain to everyone the other kinds of programming that she does. And then after that, we'll have a chance to talk to both Flavia and Walter about historical Kamishibai.
Boa noite a todos. Eu gostaria de agradecer o convite de estar com vocês essa noite. Eu sou contadora de histórias já há muitos anos, mediadora de leitura e performance. Então, eu atuo em festivais, em praças. Em 2012, eu comecei a minha pesquisa com o Kamishibai e já vinha contando as histórias de Mukashi Banashi há muitos anos. E aqui tem uma foto que eu estou na praça com um sussurrador, falando poesias. A foto de baixo, eu estou na Biblioteca Pública Municipal aqui de Araçatuba, que eu fui contadora de histórias e mediadora de leitura durante 5 anos, num projeto que tinha na biblioteca. E essa outra foto é a minha primeira atividade na Igreja Terikyo Paineira, aqui em Araçatuba, com o Kamishibai.
Good evening. I'm Flavia Wolfowitz. Thank you today for this invitation. I am a performer. I tell story. I'm a storyteller, and also I help with reading and with children. And since 2012, I also do research. Here is some pictures. The one on top is me reciting a poem in an open space. I tell stories in open spaces and libraries and schools and many places. The next one, I'm sorry, the picture is at the library, and I'm facilitating reading, helping children with the reading, and then also the other one is where I'm working in a church with Kamishibai.
A próxima. Aqui a apresentação com crianças bem pequenas da creche infantil na biblioteca, que é uma história que eu escrevi do folclore do Brasil e do Japão.
So the first one is at the library. It's in a preschool with preschool children at the library, and with a story, a folktale story that I wrote. I retold.
Depois, eu estou com a bicicleta no shopping, que eu também realizo apresentação em locais públicos.
The next one, I am with a bike in a shopping center. I also perform in public spaces.
No templo budista.
In a Buddhist temple.
O próximo slide.
Next one.
Yeah.
Em praça pública também.
It's in a public, it's a town center.
Em aniversários.
On birthday parties.
E nas festividades da Associação Nipo-Cultural aqui de Araçatuba.
This is in a festival with the Japanese community in Araçatuba.
Essa foto, se puder voltar o slide um pouquinho.
Could
Yeah,
we come back
sorry.
to the previous one? Thank you.
Eu estou apresentando no Gay No Sai essa história da Terra da Esperança. E no final, todos os alunos cantaram Furusato.
In this last picture, I'm telling the story of the Land of Hope. And at the end, all the students sang the song Furusato.
Okay.
Agora podemos ir para o
Pode?
seguinte?
Sim.
We can go to the next slide.
Em festivais de teatro, né, que é o primeiro slide.
Yes, theater
E
festivals.
E as minhas histórias eu faço interativo, eu vou convidando o público presente a participar.
With my stories, I let the public participate in the stories. It becomes interactive.
Então eu levo a roupa do Oni e levo a roupa da princesa. E as crianças vão interagindo.
I take the clothes of Oni, the demon, and also of a princess, and the children can wear them and interact.
A foto ao lado no Festival de Kamishibai do México, que eu estive em 2016, em Novo León.
And the other one is the picture of, I participated in a Kamishibai festival in Mexico in 2016.
E na foto de baixo é 2018, em comemoração aos 110 anos da imigração japonesa. Eu apresentei a história Terra da Esperança no concurso de Kamishibai de Numazu.
So the last one is 2018. It's the 110th anniversary of the Japanese immigration. And it was a contest of Kamishibai, a concurso de Kamishibai, né? A contest of Kamishibai.
E eu apresentei também na Universidade de Tokai de Kanagawa. Eu apresentei para os alunos do curso de Relações Internacionais. E o professor que me convidou foi o Daisuke Oniki, que ele tem um contato muito grande aqui com a comunidade Uba.
Can you tell me the name of the professor again?
Daisuke Oniki.
Daisuke Uni. So the professor Daisuke Uni, okay. So she went to Tokai University in Kanagawa, and she presented the Hope of Land to the international students in the international relations. And it was, this was hosted by the professor Daisuke Uni, who is related to, has relations with the Brazilian community of Uba in Brazil.
Porque eu fui falar sobre como eu realizei a pesquisa da história, né?
I went to explain how I did the research for the story.
Oh, great. Yeah, we want to hear more about that too. Okay, should I go on?
Pode ir para o próximo?
Sim.
Yes.
E as atividades com o Kamishibai educativo na sala Yochien.
These
Eu
are the
iniciei-
activities, educational activities in the kindergarten with Kamishibai.
com as histórias de Mukashi Banashi. Na foto de cima, foi o final do ano letivo de 2018, que nós apresentamos o Urashima Tarô, e as crianças fizeram os personagens e interagiram também.
So they worked with folk tales. This was at the end of the 2018 school year, and they made the Urashima Taro story, all the figures, and they created the figures themselves and told the stories.
E foi feito um butai para essa atividade, que ele tem um tamanho diferente do tradicional.
A special butai, a special stage was made for this, and it has a different dimension from the regular Kamishibai stage.
E eles fizeram as ilustrações para esse butai.
They
E os personagens.
illustrated for this stage.
Daí, no ano de 2019, nós começamos a pesquisa do nome do primeiro familiar que migrou para cá, né? Então, eles estavam fazendo a pesquisa histórica do seu nome, de que província que veio do Japão. Então, era a outra história de família, mapeando todas as províncias.
Para cada nome?
Para cada criança, sim.
Para cada criança. 2019, they started to do research. Each child started to do a research about their name when they came from their family name, when they came from Japan.
Pode ser o próximo slide.
Next slide, please.
E no início do ano passado, com as atividades suspensas pela pandemia, nós começamos a trabalhar já direto na semana seguinte, que as aulas foram online. A professora me pediu que fizesse a história do Kintaro. Então, foi feito o Kintaro.
So last year, right after the pandemic, the teacher or the school teachers asked her to make it online, and the first work she made was the story of the Japanese folktale of Kintaro.
Porque eles já tinham feito no butai anterior, os personagens do Momotaro.
They had already made the characters for the Momotaro story previously.
E devido à pandemia, eu iniciei o Clube de Kamishibai brasileiro com festivais internacionais online. Tudo pelo canal do YouTube.
Through the YouTube channel, after the pandemic, she started a Kamishibai club, Brazilian Kamishibai club, and it's all online on YouTube.
É pelo slide só, se quiserem.
Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you, Flavia. Well, as with all our guests they have so many dimensions to their work, and Flavia does so many creative things with interactive Kamishibai, with cultural exchange, and I think that we could do a whole program just about that. But today we did want to focus on historical Kamishibai. And one reason I really wanted to do this program was I've heard from several people working in the US with Kamishibai that Kamishibai is only good for fantasy or folktales. If you've been to Japan, you know that there are Kamishibai in every possible genre, and historical Kamishibai have always been very important there. So I think it's wonderful that more and more historical Kamishibai are being made around the world so people can get to know more about that. So I wanted to start by asking Walter, why did you decide to make a Kamishibai about this particular subject, the Japanese American internment?
Well, the decision was more or less made for us when the California State Library awarded us a grant to produce 2 Kamishibai stories about the subject of Japanese internment during the Second World War. We were delighted to get that opportunity, and it became a very big and challenging undertaking for us as we got more and more into it and understood more about not only its historic implications, but present day as well. We faced a variety of problems that needed to be solved. But that is the answer as to why we did it. It's because we were given the opportunity to do it and the money.
Right. I think this is mentioned a little bit in your video, especially in Veronica's interview. But what are the different settings where you perform this or where your organization has performed it?
We've yet to perform the stories for anybody.
Really?
The first thing we're going to do next, after finishing this video, is produce videos of the 2 Japanese internment stories. One is called Bruce's Story. It's about a high school age boy who has a difficult time. His father is taken away from the family once they are at post-and relocation camp in Arizona. And Bruce has a very difficult time adjusting to the reality of camp and the injustice of it all. The other story is called Ayako's Story. She's a younger girl, and it's a softer tale. Her frustrations are more personal, having to do with other children, her inability to be with friends who didn't happen to be Japanese, of Japanese descent when the family was relocated. And it's intended for younger audiences, starting with 4th grade, say age 9, and going up to perhaps 6th grade or so. But in truth, it's a young adult story. And Bruce's is intended for middle school and up through high school. But also, I don't think adults would have any difficulty at all enjoying these stories.
Right. They mentioned in the video, Walter, they mentioned that you were performing and there were planes or jets going overhead and the children were still very focused. I thought that was one of these stories.
No, it wasn't one of these stories. That was long before we even received the opportunity to make these stories. That was actually on the 100th birthday of Roald Dahl. Write Out Loud had been invited by the literary estate of Roald Dahl to help them celebrate his birthday, and here in San Diego, which we did. We thought it was an interesting opportunity. And we took the opportunity with the permission of Mr. Dahl's estate to create 2 stories based on his stories. And that is the story that I was doing in the park as the planes came over.
I see.
And I'm glad that I have living eyewitnesses to that reading, because it really did go over remarkably well given the outdoor circumstances and the competition from the planes. But it might have had a little bit to do with Roald Dahl's story too.
Well, so when it comes to making historical Kamishibai, do you think there's anything that Kamishibai as a format does with history that, that makes it an important format for telling?
Yes, the same thing that it does with stories in general.
Mhm.
I've been doing Kamishibai stories in front of live audiences, COVID aside, for the last 10 plus years. And I've always been struck by how entranced audiences become. And it's the same delivering these stories about Japanese internment. This way of telling stories is magnetic.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't attribute it just to historic Kamishibai, but it's by no means lacking with historic Kamishibai.
Well, we're definitely looking forward to hearing the full story.
So are we.
Whetted our appetite. Yeah, and actually Flavia brought this up in her introduction about the research that goes into developing a Kamishibai, a historical Kamishibai. And I know that's a big part of Walter's video where they talk about the process and the research. So we wanted to ask Flavia, how she came to do this story and what kind of research was involved.
Flávia, uma pergunta da Tara como que você chegou à ideia de criar esse Kamishibai histórico e que tipo de pesquisa envolveu nesse trabalho?
Eu comecei a realizá-lo em 2017, porque lá para setembro, outubro de 2017, porque eu fazia aula no Gakko de Nihongo e começava-se a falar da programação que teria em comemoração aos 110 anos da imigração japonesa. Então me veio assim, meu Deus, mas não existe uma história que fala sobre a imigração japonesa. Fala, mas não tem uma história inteira dela.
So she started to work with a Japanese school and in 2017, September, and then she realized that it was coming up, the anniversary, the 110th anniversary, but she realized that there are no stories really about the immigration that really tells how it happened. Even though people talk about it, but there is no story.
Então eu comecei a pegar livros sobre a imigração japonesa, tem muitos livros no Gakko, né? E fui lendo sobre o tema e me veio o desejo de fazer essa história.
So she started to read books about immigration, which was in the school. There were many, and then she started to want to write a story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
E eu me deparei que tinha ilustrações na internet reais que deveriam estar dentro do Kamishibai. Por isso que eu tenho as fotos que eram apresentadas no Japão, dos posters, convidando as pessoas a imigrarem para o Brasil.
Doing research on the internet, she encountered these posters and she really felt that these had to be in the stories, and that's why she took them and she makes it part of the story. They were posters that were encouraging Japanese to immigrate to Brazil.
Mm-hmm. E como eu estava fazendo e eu sempre levava e mostrava para a sensei, ela me colocou em contato com I6, que ainda, que nem o seu Burad, ele estava com 103 anos e eu fui entrevistá-lo. Eu fiz várias entrevistas. Então, é uma história construída verticalmente com o eixo histórico e horizontalmente anexando depoimentos.
So the way she did it is she was showing what she was finding out to the teacher, the school, in the Japanese school, and then the teacher helped her connect to the first generation immigrants. One of them was a 103-year-old man. And so the story has two, how do you say, vertical line and horizontal line, kind of. The vertical is the historic aspect of it, and the horizontal is all the testimony.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting because Flavia's Kamishibai is all very interactive, that she chose to do a story that is actually an interaction between a grandmother and a granddaughter that's built into the story. So I was wondering how she came up with that idea.
Tara is saying that a Tara disse que assim, ela nota nas suas histórias, né, que ela é muito interativa. E que aí ela viu também que nessa história tem um diálogo entre a avó e a filha,
E a
neta, né? E como que você chegou a essa ideia?
Essa ideia, porque a nova geração não sabe o que os seus antepassados passaram. E para mediar esse conhecimento, a memória da avó, a memória, ela falando do que ela passou. E o que ela conta para a neta são os depoimentos que eu tive.
So how she came up with the idea is that she noticed that the new generation, they don't really know what happened to their ancestors, and so it's sort of the conversation is a mediation between the two generations, and so the grandmother, she tells the story, and when she tells what happened, that's the testimony that she heard. That's what is important.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Posso falar?
Pode.
Porque as crianças têm um desejo muito forte de possuir tudo que é novo, muitos sapatos, muitos celulares. E eles não sabem a dificuldade que se passava um ano descalço, ganhava o sapato uma vez só para ir ao cemitério na cerimônia dos mortos. Né? Então, a importância de se falar da dificuldade que eles passaram.
So she also noticed that the young generation, they have a lot of desire to just possess material, and so new shoes and cellular phone and whatever. And it's important for them to understand the difficulties that their ancestors went through, having one a new shoe once a year for a special occasion where they would visit the grave, for instance. Pode falar.
Esse depoimento do sapato veio lá da comunidade Uba. Também teve depoimento que veio de imigrantes da igreja Tenrikyo. E as partes assim, mais... tem partes trágicas na história, então no terceiro encontro que eu conseguia finalizar aquela história de tão tocante, forte, marcante que era, né? E eu sempre... Pode traduzir, depois eu continuo.
or the testimony of the story of the shoes, that was from a community in Yuba. And she also got a lot of difficult stories from the community, from the church of Tenkyo. And then sometimes it took 2 or 3 meetings before she could really hear the story.
Walter had a story about shoes and one of his Kamishibai too. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know, Flavia saw that, but in one of Walter's Kamishibai stories, the children in the internment camps also could not easily go out and buy clothes or shoes, and
I think it's so valuable to have both of these stories available because the experiences are there are shared experiences, but also so different, right, between Brazil and the U.S. Yeah. Walter, we wanted to know, since you haven't actually performed these stories in too many settings yet, what would you advise people who want to do something like this or take on a similar project? Do you have any advice for people who might want to try to do a similar project with historical Kamishibai?
Well, one thing I would advise is do it, but do it seriously. The research that goes into a historic Kamishibai is just like any other piece of history. And even if you read Hilary Mantel or other writers of historic fiction, which is what our 2 stories are, they're both fictional stories, but they're based on things that actually happen. I think that foundation is do your research. We went to the San Diego Japanese American History Society, and they were tremendously helpful to us. And that's pretty well spelled out in the video, so I won't belabor that, but go to outside sources as well as the things that you can find in print. You find original sources oftentimes. That would be my first thing. And then take it seriously and with respect for the subject matter and the people. And create characters, if you're doing historic fiction, that are credible and drawn from your research. Those are 2 things I can say.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting what Flavia was also saying about bringing in interviews, oral history interviews, because one aspect of Kamishibai in Japan that I've been very interested in trying to reproduce here in some way is that younger generation people or the children of people in senior centers work on Kamishibai together, and it's a way to learn your history, and also it's sort of in the form of a memoir that has a historical basis. So that's something I would love to see happen more in our country as well, in the US.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I'd like to actually Write Out Loud is in a position to conceivably make that happen, because those 2 constituencies, young visiting classrooms and youngsters at story time in libraries, is one of our main activities when it isn't COVID. And also going to assisted living facilities in particular, because assisted living residents really don't get out of their residences very often at all, not nearly as often as the resident of an independent living home or residence would. So if you can go in and read to them, it's something that they really want and need. It's contact and stimulation. And the idea of bringing those 2 together would be a beautiful thing.
We should really try to invite, next time we do this, there are storytellers in Japan who do that professionally, go and work in senior centers. So it would be great to have them.
Would indeed.
Well.
Would be a great subject.
I was wondering too, Yumi, if you could ask Flavia if that is happening in Brazil too. Younger people asking their grandparents or great-grandparents about their experiences and writing them down, recording them, their personal histories and so on.
Flávia, no Brasil, você observa as pessoas mais novas, né, geração mais nova, entrevistando as pessoas de mais de idade, tanto os ancestrais, mas também outras pessoas de idade, entrevistando, gravando as testemunhas deles e tudo mais? Esse tipo de trabalho?
Tinha muito, mas agora, por causa da pandemia, não está restrito, mas sempre teve nas escolas essa interação.
Yes, in the schools there has been many, but now with the pandemic, it's paused.
Uma coisa que eu queria colocar é que o Walter falou é importante sobre você fazer o teu Kamishibai e você sair pesquisando. Que nem eu fui ler sobre a agricultura, teses sobre a agricultura do Brasil, o tanto que ela se modificou por causa da imigração japonesa.
So she wanted to emphasize how important research is, and she even researched about Brazilian agriculture and how much it has changed with or the Japanese immigration influenced the Brazilian agriculture.
Que mudou todo o paladar pelos imigrantes terem trazido as sementes do Japão para plantar aqui no Brasil, que não existia, né? Então, uma coisa que eles diziam no começo, que cenoura era comida de coelho, porque o brasileiro não tinha o hábito de comer cenoura, acelga, cabotiã e muitas outras frutas, flores. Então, foi a mudança, né?
So the Japanese brought a lot of seeds of different vegetables and even flowers and fruits, and it really changed the Brazilian diet. Like the carrots, it became some part of their diet, which it wasn't before.
It seems like there are a lot of Japanese words in Portuguese because of that in Brazil, like kabocha and
Yes, kabocha.
In the United States too.
Yeah, more and more. So Flavia showed some images of her performing this story in different settings, and we were just wondering what the response has been like. Does she have any memorable responses from the audience that she'd like to share?
For this particular story, or
right? Yeah.
Então, a Tara está perguntando, você deve ter apresentado em vários locais, né, para vários públicos, e como é a reação deles nesses diferentes locais?
Teve tudo, todos os tipos de reação, desde muitas emoções, porque todas as falas que vieram da comunidade Uba, eles pediram que relatasse todas as dificuldades. Então, eu sempre falei, né, de como foi mesmo a dificuldade quando teve a praga dos gafanhotos, a criança que andava descalça, que ia para a escola, era a própria Katsue, a minha amiga, que me ajudou a pintar para ir mais rápido. Eu fiz os desenhos e ela vinha aqui, a gente conversava e ela coloria. E o testemunho dela e de toda a comunidade sempre fizeram parte. Então, muitos choravam porque viam a história do seu pai, ou tinha passado, ou depois vinha e me contava o que ele vivenciou. E esse relato pós já entrava numa apresentação seguinte. Então,
So
é
there
uma
were,
que não terminou. Toda vez que eu apresento e alguém me fala, tá? É isso, ela acaba continuando.
so there were all sorts of reactions, and a lot of it caused a lot of emotion, strong emotion. There were a lot of testimony from the Yuba community was included about the shoes, walking without shoes, or the plague, and so on. And and after the presentation, they would come and tell them more stories, more testimony, more things, and then she would incorporate that. So it evolved as she presented.
That is what is wonderful about this kind of storytelling. It evokes other memories, and it can just keep developing. How was the audience reaction in Japan compared to Brazil? Because she was performing in Japan as well.
Qual foi a reação no Japão? Porque você também apresentou essa história no Japão, né?
Então, quando eu terminei a apresentação, uma senhora da plateia lá, que estava lá, ela pediu para o irmão da minha cunhada traduzir, porque ele que foi comigo, né? O irmão da minha cunhada que mora lá. E ela disse que ela morou, quando pequena, em São Paulo.
Essa senhora.
Essa senhora. E que ela ouvia muito isso, essas histórias, a dificuldade das amigas de escola. Ela não vivenciou, mas ela ouvia essas histórias. E ela estava muito emocionada.
So when she told the story, a lady came from the audience, and she actually had lived in São Paulo. And Flávia, desculpa, você me disse que o irmão, a cunhada do seu irmão, né?
Não. A esposa do meu irmão, meu irmão é falecido. E a minha cunhada, ela é sensei.
Certo.
O irmão dela reside no Japão.
Ah, certo. E ela que te ajudou?
E o irmão dela, que reside lá, foi comigo no festival.
So it was the wife of her brother, who lives in Japan, who helped her go there, and that's this woman came and said she lived in São Paulo long ago. Now she lives in Japan. She didn't go through these things, but she had heard about these things, and she was very, very moved by the story.
E a história da família dela faz parte, porque o avô veio como médico, e a avó dela foi a primeira parteira formada aqui de Araçatuba. Então, a história da família Katsuda também faz parte, né, da Terra da Esperança.
So the family Katsuda, who is her sister-in-law, is also part of this story because her grandfather was the one that came as a doctor.
Okay.
The first doctor.
Well, I want to thank you. We've gone a little over time. I've learned so much by talking to all of you, and I think this is a conversation that I hope will continue. We still have to hear from Walter when his stories become available for us to hear the full story. I'm looking forward to that. And I know that now we have all of everyone's contact information out there. So I hope that our attendees will also follow up and look at Yumi's website and Write Out Loud, and also check out Flavia's wonderful YouTube channel for Friends of Brazil. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and we look forward to seeing you at our next World Kamishibai Forum webinar. And please send in your questions if you didn't have a chance to tonight. We can answer them at a later time as well. Thank you. Okay, well, I hope that we covered everything. I think I had everything I had written down. How about you, Donna? Did I leave anything out?
I think so.
No, I don't think so.
No, I think she means she thinks I covered everything. I hope.
That's what I'm saying too.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. And Yumi, thank you so much. It's not easy to do, to have to be spontaneously interpreting. I know.
I hope I did okay.
You did
You did
beautiful.
beautifully. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank
gosh.
you, thank you.
Flavia,
Thank you so
thank
much,
you.
Flavia. And next
Flavia,
time we'll have
but-
you do more of your other various activities and stages, and interaction is wonderful.
Na próxima oportunidade, eles querem cobrir mais sobre o seu trabalho com o Butá especial, o trabalho na escola, tudo mais, né?
You have so many gifts to share, so we'll have to continue.
Você tem muito para compartilhar, muitas outras coisas para compartilhar.
Tem muita. É importante as pessoas aprenderem que existe a possibilidade de reinventar, né? De pesquisar, de abrir uma página até de agronomia, mas o que isso vai servir para o meu Kamishibai? Tudo serve, né?
So she's
Mostrar para
saying
o professor, né?
that people should be very curious to create new things and explore new subjects, even agriculture, like she did. People might think, what is that going to do? What does it have to do with Kamishibai? But they all are important.
Yeah, and I think that is really one of the messages that I was hoping to get across through this, that there's really, because Kamishibai is a format, it's not a genre. You can really do any genre in the Kamishibai format, just like with a film or picture books or anything else. So I'm so glad you were able to demonstrate that beautifully in both of your videos. I
Thank
think,
you.
yeah.
They're important stories that should not be forgotten.
Exactly.
Absolutely not.
São histórias muito importantes, ambas, né, do Brasil e dos Estados Unidos, que não devem ser esquecidas.
Não pode, jamais. Que nem os campos de... Eu não cheguei nessa parte, né? Mas você avisa para ele que os campos de concentração que tiveram aqui no Brasil foram 10, em 7 estados. E durante 50 anos, todas as informações eram proibidas de serem expostas pelo próprio governo, né? E a última leva de imigrantes, eles vieram com os militares, quando o Brasil estava na ditadura do Garrastazu Médici, do general. Então, o exército foi na região do Pará e dizimou os índios. Foi um massacre. Os repórteres da ONU que vieram, eles tiveram tudo apreendido. Tudo foi apreendido. Todas as informações desse massacre. E a terra foi para os japoneses plantar.
So this is, there has been in Brazil 10 internment camps in 7 states. And also the last immigration that from Japan that came to Brazil, it was during the dictatorship. And so the military accompanied and brought them here. And it was to the state of Para. But these indigenous people were living there. So that they how do you say, there was a genocide, sort of, they killed all the indigenous people to give the land to the
Right.
Japanese immigrants.
Yeah. No, it's a crazy history that does need to be told. I think most people don't know it.
And
So,
which was hidden even from Brazilians.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. Important stories. Well, thank you so much, Flavia. It was wonderful to meet you. I hope we'll meet in person, all of us.
Muito obrigada.